Welcome to Multilingual Migrant Worker News for the second week of November. I'm Linda Kwan. Our top story tonight, according to Korean standard labor law, anyone who works at a business with 5 or more employees for over a year must be paid severance pay. In reality, however, it seems it is not quite that easy for migrant workers to receive their severance pay. Kain got a call from his family in Burma telling him that his parents were sick. As a result, he decided to quit his job that he had worked at for the last 5 years and return home. But it has been 4 months now, and he has not yet been able to leave the country, nor has he been able to work because he is still waiting to receive his severance pay.
저한테 그냥 계속 전화 통화하시고 그냥 욕하더라고요. 욕도 가고 그리고 뭐 협박도 가고 여러 가지로 협박하고 있습니다. 그래서 지금은 제가 가야 너 집에 빨리 가라. 계속 이런 식으로 나오면 그냥 뭐 너는 뭐 사람 찾으면서 그냥 너는 죽어버리겠다고 그 협박도 가고요. 여러
After receiving threats from his boss, he sought help from a migrant worker human rights organization. Through the organization, he has received advice about the process involved in receiving his severance pay. Currently, Kain has filed a petition with the Ministry of Labor and is awaiting the response from the investigation of his former employer.
그 월급을 못 받아서 이제 그 상담소를 찾아오는 친구들에 비해서는 해결률이 조금은 좀 떨어지는 편이에요. 왜냐하면 이제 퇴직금이라는 것이 어쨌든 그 근로가 종료된 이후에 이제 청구하는 돈이기 때문에 보통 사업주들에게 연락을 취하면 대개는 반응이 그런 걸 내가 왜 줘야 하느냐 혹은 그런 거 없다.
Hwagesa Temple in Seoul held a special memorial ceremony on October 28th for migrant workers that have died in Korea. The memorial ceremony was held as a way to comfort the souls of the many migrants that have died while struggling in Korea. The Korean Buddhist ceremony was followed by individual mourning rituals from each country, including Mongolia, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Indonesia, Burma, Nepal, and the Philippines. According to the Memorial Service Planning Committee, an estimated 3,000 migrant workers have died over the last 10 years from industrial disasters, violence, immigration raids, and suicide. Hwagesa monk Sugyung stated that this event was the first step toward actively trying to solve the problems facing migrant workers who have repeatedly suffered from human rights violations since coming to Korea. Now, with the active support of Buddhist priests who stated regret for not doing more to help migrant workers over the last decade. Following on the heels of foreign brides from Vietnam and the Philippines, the number of brides from Cambodia has recently increased, and along with it, reports of abuse toward these Cambodian women have also been on the rise. The number of women that have come from Cambodia through marriage visas this year is over 1,300, nearly 4 times more than the 360 of last year. There's also been a noticeable increase in the number of international marriage brokers arranging marriages exclusively with Cambodian women. This change has come as a result of marriage brokers turning their attention to Cambodia after stricter regulations began to be imposed on international marriage agencies in Vietnam. Since there are currently no restrictions concerning international marriages from Cambodia, cases of abuse toward Cambodian brides are steadily increasing over time.
굉장히 더 많이 나는 것 같아요. 보통 뭐 20살 정도 이렇게 다른 나라들이 나는데 캄보디아는 뭐 30살, 40살 이렇게 나는 경우들도 있고요. 그 지방 쪽이 많거든요. 캄보디아는 아무래도 서울보다는 목포나 뭐 이런 그 전라도 해안 쪽이 많은데 그런 쪽에서 여성들이 와서 이제 뭐 이렇게 잘 힘들 때 결혼 중개업체에서 나가서 돈을 벌어라 그러면은 그리고 이제 그 돈을 결혼 중개업체에서 뭐 3분의 1을 가진다든가 월급을 뭐 그런 식의 상담들이 많이 들어오고 있는 것 같아요.
Part of a generation that left Korea in their 20s to go to work in Germany have now returned home for the first time in 40 years. 11 that returned held a press conference last Monday, November 5th in Myeongdong in Seoul to appeal to both Korean society and the government to remember what Korea was like only 30 years ago and to advocate for non-discriminatory policies against migrants. At the press conference, this group that left during the 60s and 70s and worked primarily as miners and nurses in Germany said that when they heard stories of the human rights violations toward migrant workers in Korea today, as fellow immigrants, they felt ashamed. In addition, they stated that prevailing attitudes toward migrant workers and foreign brides need to change to acknowledge them as members of Korean society, and that current foreign labor policy focusing on employment needs to shift toward prioritizing labor human rights. They also called on the government to immediately halt the crackdown on and forced deportations of migrant workers, as well as to improve the lopsided Become Korean policies aimed at immigrant wives. In political news, with just over a month left until the upcoming Korean presidential election, former Prime Minister and two-time presidential candidate Lee Hae-chang's announcement to run in this year's presidential election has thrown the race for a loop. With his late entry into the race, Lee Hae-chang has established his influence in the election by joining front-runner Grand National Party candidate and former Seoul Mayor Lee Myung-bak and turning it into a three-way race between the two Lees and the United New Democratic Party candidate and former Unification Minister Jung Dong-young, who now holds the number 3 position. Many variables could affect the outcome of the race, from the BBK stock price fixing scandal linked to Lee Myung-bak to the campaign finance scandal from Lee Hae-chang's previous presidential bid, as well as the decision to unify separate Democratic parties in order to consolidate votes. What has now seemingly turned into a match between Lee Myung-bak, the official Grand National Party candidate, and Lee Hae-chang, GNP Party founder and former chair, threatens to split the vote among conservative voters, with much depending on which side former GNP chair Park Geun-hye will choose to support. Over 40,000 people gathered for the 21st annual labor rally to commemorate the death of the famous labor activist Chun Tae-il in front of Seoul City Hall